So today's gospel picks up where we left off last Sunday. Jesus, he spent a long time sitting in a boat, teaching people from the boat and telling them about what they can accomplish with faith the size of a mustard seed. And believe it or not, we're in church. We're going to come back to that idea of faith in just a minute. But first, after that long day of teaching from the boat, Jesus says to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side." Now, he's literally talking about going to the other side of the lake, but that phrase, "let us cross to the other side," struck me as I was going through the readings, probably because for the last few weeks I've been kind of stuck between two sides. Let me explain. A few weeks ago, I had cataract surgery on my right eye. I now have 20/15 vision in that eye. My astigmatism has been corrected, but that's only half of the equation. I need reading glasses at the moment. That's what these are. I used to wear glasses that didn't really correct my left eye anyway, and since my right eye got fixed, there's really no point in wearing them. Apparently, the doctor said I'd mostly been using my right eye to see for quite some time anyway, and since the surgery, I guess that's been even more true. But aside from the reading glasses, this side of my world is crystal clear. But when I need to look at something on this side, like if I have to check the rearview mirror out the driver's side window, well, suddenly I got nothing. Now, moving from this side of my face to the other side, I go from good vision with no cataract and no astigmatism to bad vision with a big cloudy cataract and pretty severe astigmatism. And I frequently am aware these days that I am in the process of crossing to the other side. From not seeing very well to having very good vision, but as we talk today, I'm in the middle of the lake. I know I'm on my way, but I'm not there yet. Now, I've come to think of my cyclops vision as a metaphor for the spiritual life. Now, the good eye, it's like the part of me that gets things done, serves God and neighbor with a cheerful spirit, wants what's best for everyone. The bad eye is like the part of me I don't want to think about, the part I'd rather not admit exists, even to myself, the part that thinks about the bad stuff, like revenge, feeling resentful, the stuff I know can hurt me and others, but that tempts me anyway. So for the last few weeks, the journey from here to here has felt like a metaphor for a trip between my best self and my worst. And I get frustrated because I just feel off. What I'm seeing through my good eye sometimes looks very different from what I'm seeing through my bad eye. The light looks different. Colors are a little different. And when I notice those differences, I sometimes get a little miffed with my doctor for scheduling these two operations so far apart. His name, by the way, is Dr. Watson, which doesn't have anything to do with this homily, but as a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I think it's cool that I got a doctor named Dr. Watson. And in a few weeks, I will see better out of both eyes. But while I'm in this period of crossing from one side to the other, it's not uncommon for a storm or two to build up inside of me the way the storm blew up on the lake in today's gospel as Jesus and the disciples were crossing to the other side. Now, I try to focus with the good eye, but sometimes the bad one takes over. And when the two eyes clash, it can create a storm inside of me. Storms show up when my eyes see the world differently or when my inclinations urge me to behave differently. I think what I need to remember, I think what all of us need to remember is that God is there in all of it. We need to trust that. Storms do happen inside of us and outside of us, and there can be a lot of them. I mean, consider this year. We're looking at a storm named for every letter of the alphabet, according to the people that, predict the hurricanes. And closer to home, we've had rain and wind and hail and tornadoes. I'm willing to bet that if we went out into the parking lot right now, it would not take us very long to find a car or two that has some dents in it from hail. Funny story, a couple of weeks ago, Ginny and I were walking the dog, and we ran into a neighbor of ours who grew up in England, And I always like to mention his name. It's Ben Franklin. We have a neighbor named Benjamin Franklin. Now, that also has nothing to do with this homily, but we live down the block from a guy named Ben Franklin. So we stopped to chat with Ben. That's Ben Franklin, by the way. And he told us about damage he had gotten to his house and cars from hail. And strangely, though we live less than half a block away, we didn't get any damage. Sometimes that's just how it works. And that brings me to our first reading today. Some of you may not be completely familiar with all the details, but at least you probably know about Job. He was exactly the sort of guy who would get hail damage when his neighbors did not. Job began with pretty much everything, but then God and Satan made this little wager about whether Job would remain such a good guy if he lost everything. So one day, Job's livestock, his servants, even his children are suddenly killed, and Job's skin breaks out in boils. And then his friends come, and every one of them tells Job he must have done something really bad or these bad things wouldn't be happening. In fact, most of the book of Job is speeches from these know-it-all friends of Job who are insisting that he must not be as good and holy as he seems. But through it all, Job remains faithful. He continues to trust God. Job does, however, challenge God to explain why he has to suffer like this. And today's reading comes from near the end of the book of Job, when finally God addresses Job's challenge, speaking to him from a storm, which turns out to be a pretty common setting for an appearance of God in the Old Testament. God addresses Job, but God does not explain why Job suffered, not really. Instead, the Lord basically tells Job that when Job has done some of the things that God has done, then they can talk. It's not really an answer, but at least it's a conversation. And in today's gospel, then we hear about another storm. But Jesus is not revealed to be God in the storm. Something about Jesus is revealed because he stops the storm. It's a great miracle. But it doesn't end there. It's what Jesus says to his friends after he stops the storm that I want to look at using my own incomplete Cyclops-like vision. Jesus asks, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" So we come back to that idea of faith. Do you not yet have faith? What is Jesus asking? What is faith? Do you have faith if you believe? Well, yeah, I guess so. Do you have faith if you think Jesus is the Son of God? Again, that's definitely part of it. But what is faith? I would argue it's not really belief, or at least not entirely. It's not showing up at church on Sunday either, though that certainly is part of it. The synonym we like to use for faith around here is trust. Job displayed faith because even as his world fell apart, he trusted. The disciples did not yet have faith because even with God himself on the boat in the person of Jesus, they didn't trust. Faith is trusting that even when your plans fall apart, God remains. It's trusting that when the relationship with the love of your life ends, God is there. It's trusting that when the diagnosis is not what you would have hoped, God is there. It's trusting that when your boss decides that the best way to balance the books of the company is to eliminate a whole bunch of jobs, one of which might be yours, God is there. It's trusting that God is there in the storm. It's also trusting that God can stop the storm. Whether you encounter that storm through your good eye or your bad one, through your best self or your worst self, you're still encountering God. But often we don't get it. We can't seem to trust. Jesus calms a storm, but for me, the real take-home message is not so much that Jesus has power over nature, it's that Jesus himself trusts. When the storm is brewing, he's asleep on a cushion. That tells us at least two things. One, he was pretty tired after teaching all day, but two, he trusts these fishermen friends of his to get him to the other side, and he trusts the Father to shut the storm down. God is in the storm, but God also can calm the storm, whether it be a storm outside of us or a storm inside of us. Faith trusts that God is in the storm with us, even when the people like Job's friends are telling us we wouldn't be having these problems if we were really good people. Even when the voice inside our head tells us we aren't what we need to be. We can fall into the trap of thinking that we're no better than our worst thoughts and actions. But God doesn't go away. We can start to believe that first we have to conquer our sinfulness, only approach God after we've done that, make ourselves worthy. But newsflash, we can never make ourselves worthy. The good news is we don't have to. God stays with us through the storms and loves us and tries to convince us that no matter where we are on the journey to the other side, we are beloved. To believe anything else is just plain wrong. God is always loving us just as we are, right where we are. We shouldn't stop trying, but God loves us even when we fail. Having faith is trusting that God is with us in the storms. God is with us in our messiness. God stays with us through all things, no matter what. All of us are in the process of crossing to some other side, and none of us are there yet. But God is with us as we journey. And God really can help us get to the other side. But if there's something holding us back, God doesn't just throw us off the boat. God waits and loves us, even when, maybe especially when we can't see that. To have faith is to trust that, to remember that God accepts us as we are, where we are, no matter what. That's a lot easier when we can see it. When we encounter the storms, we may not feel it. But the truth is that God's there, and faith is trusting that, even when we don't feel it.